Hi, everyone. Thank you again for connecting and joining me in another interview that I will be having today with a special friend of mine and colleague, Kenzo Tsuru. So I look forward to connecting with him and sharing his story. He has a really, really cool, interesting story that I'm sure a lot of people are going to feel inspired. And so I really look forward to sharing his story with you guys all. So if you guys don't mind, I will be in. Uh, so thank you again for all your support. Thank you again for supporting this whole. Hey, Kenzo.
Hey Jenny, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Just enjoying the very rare good weather we're suddenly getting in Georgia. It's
Yeah.
been hectic this week. It goes like 20 to 60 to like negative 15 to 75, and it's fine. I'm fine. Everything is fine.
Yeah, so I did want to show you something before we get started. I did want to
Yeah.
show you something that I think you would love. So look at my shirt.
Oh my God, yes! El Ángel de Independencia.
El Ángel de la Independencia de la Ciudad de México. Yes.
Yes. I love it.
I needed to do it. I needed to do it because I'm like, Kenzo would love this. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This is my lovely friend and colleague, Kenzo Tsuru. Kenzo Tsuru was born and raised in Ciudad de Mexico in Mexico City. And then he is biracial, so he is Japanese and Mexican. Yay! Which is really cool. And he moved to Georgia at a young age, and then went to college in NYU, so New York University, a really prestigious school. And he's now located in Atlanta, and we were able to work together. And I had the privilege of meeting this amazing person in Atlanta, Georgia. We both worked for Georgia State University as admissions counselors. So I really got to enjoy him. So welcome, Kenzo. I'm looking forward to really sharing your story, and I know it's a really cool, interesting one. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, of
Sound
course.
good? Did I do good?
Yeah, sounds good. I'm excited to sort of out you a little bit with all our shenanigans at Georgia State too. So get ready.
Yeah. So Kenzo, so share with us your full name and where you were born and raised. I shared a little bit of that, but you can give a little bit more on that.
Sure. So full name wise, it's a little confusing. Technically, my full name is Kenzo Adrian Zaragoza Tsuru, but here in the United States, I go by Kenzo Tsuru, just so that way I don't scare the gringos. Um, I'm kidding. But I was also born and raised in Mexico City, so I was born right there in the DF, or I guess that's Ciudad de Mexico now. I lived there for about 6 years or so about really like 5. We ended up moving to the United States, and I swear it was December 2001. My parents say it was December 2000, but I vividly remember like when we traveled based on the time and the year. And then we moved to Marietta, kind of bouncing around a little bit in the Atlanta metro area before finally settling down in Roswell, Georgia. So not where the aliens are from, for any of y'all that are from New Mexico. I promise you the only alien in Roswell is me. I'm kidding, but yeah, so I ended up growing up in Roswell, Georgia. That's where I did all my public school education and everything.
Amazing. And so you went to NYU for undergrad, which is a really prestigious school. And so what degrees did you actually obtain there?
Sure. So another kind of long one, but in essence, I got my Bachelor's of Science in Science and Technology Studies. For those of you that don't know, Science and Technology Studies is essentially the intersection of liberal arts and engineering. So I did 2 years of engineering, 2 years of liberal arts. And with all those different little like major minors that I could do, I also ended up getting a concentration in pre-law with a minor in psychology. So really got my hand in every little bowl I could. I'm like, I want some of that, some of this, some of that, and this.
Yep, taking advantage of it all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's your current job slash career?
Sure. So I currently work at Georgia State University as an admissions counselor 3. So what that 3 essentially just means is that I have some out-of-state territories, in-state territories, and specialties. So I also oversee the homeschool students. So if any homeschool students are in here knowing about how to get to college, hit me up. Um, and I also specialize with our Latinx population now. So, for those of you that don't know, Jenny was our Latinx counselor at Georgia State. She was amazing and kind of was the one that introduced me and onboarded me to that whole process, which was great because, little baby Kenzo out of college, not really knowing what work life really was. So I ended up, going under Jenny's wing. She and I would yell at each other. And then after she left, unfortunately, I then became, literally yelled at each other. And I felt bad because our grad director right next to us would be like, just listening in on our conversation. And I vividly remember the one time that Jenny, I think we were working late that night. We were reviewing applications or something. And then she just screams from across the hallway like, Kenzo, do you have a hair tie? Without even skipping a beat, I'm like, hold on, let me check my really long hair for my hair ties. And poor Lita, who's a graduate director, she just started cracking up. She's like, I'm so glad I'm next to y'all. Like, it was fantastic. But I ended up picking up the Latinx student population from you. And, hopefully I'm doing you justice. I'm keeping you proud and doing so.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. So let's dive into kind of your story, what it all meant to be a Latinx individual in Georgia. So how was that for you versus New York, I guess? Like, how was that transition and how was it within your identity and kind of that, like, how did that all play out?
Sure. So it's really interesting because, as Jenny kind of mentioned, I'm half Japanese, half Mexican. So mom's Japanese, my dad's Mexican. All of us were born in Mexico, though, so it's kind of an interesting story. So coming to Georgia at first, and it was funny because over the summer, I started to get that, Hispanic tan. I started to look like a chilango, de verdad. I kind of speak like a chilango at times, too. So people would be thrown off. They'd be like, oh, my God, what is this squinty Hispanic person speaking Spanish all of a sudden? But it was definitely different because my elementary school was all white kids. I think there was one other Hispanic girl named Christina who was in my grade, and then she left. And then one other Asian girl named Skylar who was there with me and, still continues to be one of my best friends. But it was definitely different because, you have those families that are all, very homogenous, very, pretty much the same background, kind of almost like cookie cutter families. And there's me who would like kind of be like, oh, well, I was raised, that you have to be super humble and polite, which is very Japanese, or, focusing on family, which is very Hispanic. And then I would go to some kid's house and the kid would yell to their mom, like, what do you want, Ma? And I'm like, oh my God, the rude, the disrespectfulness. But, that's a culture thing here. So it was definitely a little difficult growing up in my formative years, just because I was kind of prompted to fit in with the white communities here in Georgia, which, isn't always a bad thing. You always have to kind of conform and fit into the communities that you're in. But as a result, that sort of made me ignore a lot of my Hispanic and Asian backgrounds and kind of started thinking, especially when we're in middle school, stuff like that, your peers' influences and, their behaviors affect how you think of yourself. So I remember vividly thinking at one point, like, oh, I don't want to be Hispanic. I just want to be Asian. Right? I don't want to have both. I just want to be one or the other because especially, growing up Mexican in Georgia, they're like, oh, how was crossing the border or how was blah, 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 back in the old Wild West days of YouTube, especially when there were no filters, no rules, you can post whatever you want. It was definitely a challenge. And then moving to New York was a huge eye-opener. I mean, at that point, I'm in college. I'm realizing that, I'm not just one person. I'm not just one thing. I am Hispanic. I am Asian. I'm an immigrant. I'm a first-generation college student here in the United States. And I'm also gay. So it was like, I can't just pick and choose my identities. I have to find that overall intersection between all of them. And New York really helped me sort of accept that. I ran into so many people that were like I joined SHEP, the Society for Professional Hispanic Engineers. And I loved it because immediately it was like, oh, we're Hispanics, si se puede, we can take the world, and blah, blah, blah. And there were other people there that were, biracial Hispanic. So there were some Filipinos who were also like Hispanic or Colombian or Mexican. And seeing them embrace that intersection really motivated me to be like, okay, you know what? I can be Japanese. I can be Mexican. I'm not limiting myself to one or the other. But I've also had so much more fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some of those Hispanic sessions for you, and I keep doing them now, and they're always like, Kenzo, you go do the Spanish session. And I'm like, all right, time to scare some people away, because they see the Asian kid and they're like, this isn't, Japanese. This is supposed to be a Mexican session. And immediately I'm like, hola, buenos días, ¿cómo están todos? And you just see them and go like, el chino habla español, el chino habla español. And I'm like, yeah, pues sí, el chino habla español, pero no soy chino, soy japonés. So it was great because, you see that transition of conservative kind of trying to fit into a place that really allows you to be you and to love yourself. And that's really what I learned in college. It wasn't really my degree. It was learning how to come to terms with my multiple identities and to really understand that those identities give me a unique perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important. And to kind of embrace them, right? Like embrace everything that you are. It's not just one identity or the other. It's you have a lot. And so really being able to kind of embrace that and be okay with kind of having the duality of different identities. Thank you for sharing that. Now, what are you most proud of within the Latinx culture and why?
Sure. So, I think the thing that I'm most proud of in terms of the Latinx culture is the sense of family and community that we have. Just because, again, cultural difference, I'm not sure why maybe some of the Americans are kind of like this, but, this idea of when your kids finish college, get out, right? Like, you're no longer my problem. You can't be in my house anymore. I need to fix my marriage with your mother. And I'm just thinking, like, that is so interesting because, my parents, I went to one of the most expensive colleges in the United States, which, oh my God, it was so expensive. But the entire step of the way, they weren't saying like, oh, if you fail, you're out. Or if you come home, you have to find another place. Every single time it was, if I do bad, it's okay. Stuff happens. Come, keep trying. We're here to support you. Even when I did, I applied to 150 jobs in New York. I think the only one that I got was like the door-to-door salesman recruiting. Like, do you want a knife? I have many knives, and I'm just walking around New York with a suitcase full of knives, and I don't want to do that. So I came back to Georgia. My parents were like, don't worry about it. Live with us. You can stay with us as long as you want to. And Jenny, as soon as I started working at Georgia State, I was commuting from Roswell down to Atlanta, and that's an hour-long commute. But the fact that I was able to have my family there to be able to say like, oh, I can come home to my mom and dad, eat some of that good, Mexican food, Japanese food, really be taken care of.
Yeah.
But, to also not just mooch off of them, but then immediately to be able to say like, okay, Dad, I'm going to do all the yard work. I'm going to do all the housework. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And it wasn't really like you have to do this or we kick you out. It was just, I'm at home. I'm going to do what I need to do to help my parents out. Even if it's not money, if it's not, directly work related, at least there's some way I can help out. And that's what I love about being Hispanic is just no matter what community you look at, whether they're Mexican, Honduran, Peruvian, Ecuadorian, and no matter who or where they're from, they're always like, yes, family is such a huge thing. And I absolutely love that.
Yeah. The sense of support that you are always given, right? Regardless of that identity or regardless of where you're coming from as a Latino, I think you can always count on that support for sure from family. So I definitely could agree to that. Now, can you kind of share who you think or who's that motivator in your life that you can kind of pinpoint that has always been there and how have they motivated you in life?
Sure. So mine, it's funny because my biggest motivator in my life is my mother. My mom, she's Japanese, and if you don't know much about my family, it's that my mom, she's a consultant and she's in a very specialized field. So it's not one of those where she can, just kind of go to Atlanta and get a job. She has to travel a lot. So growing up, after we moved to the United States, one of the things she would do is she would leave on Sundays, maybe come back on Saturdays and repeat the next week. So although she was never, she wasn't really physically there with me a lot, and I don't blame her for that at all. I understood that she did it for her job purposes and everything, but that's kind of what motivated me a lot about her, is that she was willing to make all these huge sacrifices for the betterment of her family, right? And I think that's a story you hear a lot about Latinx families. You hear the dad might go to the United States to provide for their family back in Mexico or back in Latin America.
Yeah.
And it just, again, it shows you, we're willing to go so above and beyond to really help those that we love. And that's what motivated me about her, because she did so good. She ended up, and I told you the story, Jenny, that she was one day going to be promoted to the president of the American division. But because, the people in Japan, they don't like to see a woman as president. They ended up dissolving the entire American branch. So rather than letting that get her down and, thinking, oh, where are we going to move? What are we going to do? She started her own company and is now one of the most coveted consultants in her field. And I was just like, that shows you. As a woman in a world where people are always fighting against you, there's always a way to be successful and to make them mad. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because, that make them mad aspect is kind of what drove me. I live for spite. When someone tells me, oh, you can't do that. Like when, a certain colleague of ours was like, oh, you won't be able to get that QR code implemented. What did I do? I got that QR code implemented, right? I got the 2 weeks in and I got that in there already. So, she definitely motivates me a lot. And the way that she lives her life and the way that she puts herself before everyone else, that's kind of what I try to emulate and try to mimic, because I know that's really going to be what's going to get me furthest in life, not just in success, but like with family, with friends, with the things that matter.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. It's so true. I feel like that only fuels the power to really show that you actually can, So I definitely can agree to that. So let's tap into your education experience. So at NYU, how was it for you as a Latino? How was that experience for you? And especially both of us as being in the higher ed world now, how was that experience really for you? Can you kind of share a little bit on that?
Sure. So, I think this is really a universal thing, but maybe applying into college, it was definitely a rough experience, especially being the first person in my family to apply to college here in the U.S. I didn't really have that knowledge, support, or that guidance that maybe you would get as a, second generation college student, or even as like a U.S. citizen. Your parents came here, they studied here and everything. So that was definitely a challenge. And I'm so glad that now I'm in a position where I can, be that person of guidance for a lot of these students that maybe have those doubts, those worries, or those concerns. But once I was in NYU, it was a phenomenal experience. The instant I told people like, oh yeah, like I'm half Mexican, or, I'm half Japanese or whatever, they were like, yes, that's amazing. I want you to be a part of the Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers. I want you to be a part of OSTEM. I want you to be blah, blah, blah. Like, this is the Society of Asian American Engineers. And I absolutely love that, because it wasn't just, a place where I would go to each club and only see one group of people. There was so much overlap between each club and group. So I absolutely loved it, because it showed me that diversity isn't just a matter of, oh, we need one woman, we need, one Hispanic, one African American, whatever. It's the fact that it's the combination of multiple cultures, societies, backgrounds, religions that really come together and show you such a unique perspective on life, right? Just because no matter what club or where I went, there were students that were Muslim, or that were Hindi, Christian, atheist, whatever. They were Hispanic, Asian, Black American, or African American, or any of those. And being able to talk to every single person, especially my Latinx colleagues, students, and coworkers, it was fantastic, because I would talk to. I remember I had Caesar, who was one of the tour guides I worked with. And we would always talk about our differences between, Mexican and Puerto Rico, or Mexico and Dominican Republic, and all these other countries, and be like, so how do you say, to grab something in your Spanish, right? And the one from Colombia would tell me like, oh, you say to coger. And I'm like, oh, no, not at all. That's not what you say in Mexico. And I love that, because it showed, even within Latin America, everyone has a different identity that provides a different background that you can look into.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so funny. Yeah, I definitely kind of got a sense of that while I was living in Georgia too, in Atlanta. There was a lot more Latin American folks out there and from South America and whatnot, that definitely brought that sense of language difference, I guess, and being able to catch that, right? Like, I say things in a different way. And Spanish is just so broad in that aspect that you can say things all kinds of ways and people can interpret it differently in different areas. So
exactly.
I can definitely relate.
And I remember we talked to Romina that one time, and we were talking about that student tour guide, that student tour that I was translating live for them.
Oh yeah.
And I was telling, and we were talking about like, tell us about the politics in the area and blah blah blah. And like, I can't really get into this, but el pelo de elote que tenemos in the White House, and they just looked at me and were like, "Pero de elote, what are you trying to say?" And I had to be like, "Elote," like in English is corn, and they're like, "Ah, bocina," and I'm just thinking, "Speaker?" And we tried to tell Romina, and Romina was like, "Yeah, you say bocina," and I'm like, "Romina, I love you, but you're wrong."
Sí, era una familia chilena, ¿no?
Chilena, I think, yeah.
Ajá.
And I was just thrown off. I'm like, well, Sina, I've never heard that for corn before. I immediately thought like a corn speaker.
Yeah. So funny. Yeah. And why did you actually decide to pursue the degree that you did? Why, like, who kind of geared you to that? Who helped you kind of decide why that degree? Can you kind of share a little
Sure.
bit about that?
So I think this is a very important story for anyone going into college, but I definitely went in thinking I'm going to do mechanical engineering with an aerospace minor, concentration, blah, blah, blah. And I thought I was so smart, but then when calculus started going in 3 dimensions, I went in 3 dimensions out the door into a different major, right? Just because immediately I was like, you know what, this is hard, I'm not doing well, I'm not enjoying it, so let me change my major.
Yeah.
And what was really funny was that I kind of came into college doing mechanical engineering, but when I was growing up, I'm like, I'm going to be a lawyer because I'm not sure if you ever saw the Lifetime show Dead Drop Diva.
Mm-mm.
That was like my mom, that was my mom and my shit. Like we would watch that and just catch up and watch Drop Dead Diva and be like, sassy lawyer, like, yes, get it. And I'm like, I'm going to be the sassy lawyer that's going to get it.
Mhm.
And so, 2 years into mechanical engineering school, it's really hard to change a major and then switch to something that can still graduate within 4 years.
Mm.
So I knew that we had the science and technology studies department, and I talked to Jim Lewis, who was my advisor and my professor, and I was like, tell me more about this. You're the department chair. I want to learn more. I want to really know what I'm getting myself into.
Mhm.
And he was saying that what's really unique about it is it's specifically that intersection of different fields and different areas. Because one of the classes I took was medicine, law, and technology. And it was very unique because, one of the things we talked about is, with technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine, on whose fault does it lie if something goes wrong, right?
Mhm.
And especially like if we're doing a new cancer treatment or cancer medication drug, which, is fantastic, we definitely need to improve our research in these fields and studies. But, if the machine isn't updated to it and it kills the patient, well, then is it the machine's fault? Is it the hospital's fault? Whose fault is it? How important is it to be able to look into these different STEM fields that are kind of viewed objectively and add a subjective lens to them? One of the biggest things that I learned and that was incredible to find out about was that African American women in particular are at a higher risk of heart attack because when they go to a doctor, when they go to the hospital saying like, oh, I have chest pain, I have, I'm thinking I'm having a heart attack, very often these doctors and these medical professionals will disregard their experience because they might be trying to compare it to the white woman's experience or the white man's experience.
Mhm.
So, that's kind of what kind of drove me into that field was because I saw that science, technology, engineering, and math is not as objectively as I thought. And there's so many factors that go into it, such as racism, discrimination, classism, stuff like that, that, we kind of think are in their own field. That I was like, you know what, that's what I want to do. Whether it's I go into higher education like I am now and kind of what I'm sticking in, or if I wanted to go into law, they really provided me with a way to kind of look at things from a multi-perspective view, right? If a student is applying late and they can't get their documents, my role isn't to just assume, wow, they're lazy and I shouldn't trust them.
Mhm.
It's what factors are going on in their lives that are affecting them this way.
Mhm.
And honestly, that's why I loved it. That's why I did it. But also because, half Japanese, half Mexican, gay, immigrant, growing up in the United States, there's so many factors in my life that affected me and how I became and who I am now that, having that perspective and lived it personally, now I definitely wanted to make a career out of it, make some studies and stuff like that. And, my thesis paper, I loved it because it literally combined all the different aspects with African American women health and HIV and AIDS in New York. And I think that really just sort of summarized my experience. I was just like, yes, this is what I want to do. It's who I am, and this is what I want to make a career out of.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Now let's dive into kind of the career aspect of things and tap into essentially what you do at Georgia State University. So what does it mean to be the admissions counselor there at Georgia State?
Sure. So it means I send a lot of spam mail. Essentially, I oversee a couple of territories like in-state, out-of-state, and specialties that, and I'm so sorry for any students that we potentially have in here, but if you ever get those emails coming from a counselor at, XY University that's in charge of your area, that's marketing, first of all. That's not directly me, I swear to you. I'm not trying to spam your inbox. But No, that's kind of like 90% of my job. It's reaching out to these students, seeing if they need any help with their application, if they have any questions about the enrollment process or anything like that. But also, to schedule events and visits to high schools and different demographical areas to address the need for higher education. And, not necessarily, and at least personally, I don't like to do the way where, you hear a lot of colleges, maybe when you were in high school, they would be like, oh, we're the best school and we have a great student life and blah, 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 really trying to sell you on the services that the university has. But I make it a personal goal, and Jenny, you and I did this a lot together, was finding the correct path to college. Not necessarily come to Georgia State, but, oh, is money a concern? Let's look at perimeter college. Let's look at some community and technical college areas where you can save some money, get some credits done, and then transfer in. Yeah. Or if you're documented, what can we do to make sure that you're not paying an out-of-state tuition while also, maybe trying to get you on that citizenship path. So that's kind of like the direction I'm going into now, and I absolutely love it. And Jenny, this is something new that we actually just got approval for. But hopefully soon we'll be able to do an LGBTQ-centered information session event with a primary focus in homeless youth here in Atlanta. So I'm very excited. I'm going to be working with the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center. So let's go, because I know that those students have a lot of questions coming in.
That is huge. That's amazing. The simple fact that they're willing to tap into that world and service those students, I think that goes a long way. So that's awesome that Georgia State's doing that. So at what point did you kind of touched based on how the process was for job hunting in New York and how you moved to Atlanta, Georgia, or Atlanta in general, but essentially kind of how did you end up in higher ed, and kind of if you can walk us through that process.
So this is going to sound ridiculous, but the first thing that got me into higher education was this bomb-ass tour guide jacket that the tour guides at NYU got. It was the NYU ambassador jacket. It's super popular. Everyone would always try to get it, but it's only available to the tour guides. So I thought, and I thought I want that jacket. But two, when I did my tour of NYU, I remember this, and I think I told you this, where my tour guide immediately said, I'm not going to walk backwards, we're going to walk forward. So I'm like, okay, rude. And it makes sense. You're in New York, you can't walk backwards. But immediately I was like, just you wait. 2 years, I'm going to come here and I'm going to take your job. And 2 years later, I was at NYU and I was an ambassador. So I did it. But in that experience as a tour guide at NYU, I absolutely loved being able to talk to students, being able to explore their options at NYU and beyond. But also maybe it was just that student and parent interaction that really sold it to me. And once I graduated from college, I was thinking, well, I want to get a master's. I really want to, try to go debt-free, which is the biggest challenge of our generation. So I started looking at colleges, and I applied to all the colleges in New York. None of them reached back. I applied to all the ones here in Georgia, and Georgia State was the only one to get back to me. And immediately I already knew about Georgia State and the great work that they were doing. So I said, yes, absolutely. Let me do the interview. Let me go ahead and work with them. At that point, by the time I got the interview, and Jenny, you were in that interview.
Yeah.
It was just fantastic. I absolutely loved it, because immediately I saw that you guys said, oh, he's Spanish, entonces hablas español? And I'm like, hell yes, sí hablo español, putas. Like, what did you expect? No, I'm kidding. I was much more professional, I promise. But it was fantastic, because I think that's really when we first clicked. But, at that point, I had 4 years as a tour guide, a couple of years as a Welcome Week leader and orientation leader, and just having that impact on those students is really what drove me to higher education. Even to this point now, where those students, they come in right when the semester starts, and they come in and they see you, and I may not remember them just because, I talk to thousands of students every semester, but being able to have them to come in and say, thank you so much, you helped me out with this, is the biggest reward I could get from this job. I don't care about the salary at that point. It's like, this is what I'm here for. This is what I loved.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that too, because being an admissions counselor, you're essentially a recruiter and you're representing the university. And so there are times where you kind of find yourself like, so why am I doing this? What's the purpose behind this work, right? And like how you explained, when and you find out that you actually were that mentor or that guide for families and students, to essentially kind of help their process in college, I think that goes a long way. So I think that I also can relate to that in the sense of, I feel like that is my purpose currently as a higher ed professional in admissions, to really guide them through the process and really find ways to make it easier for them, because I also felt like when I was going through that process, it was so hard for me and I lacked that support. So I definitely want to be there for these families and students. So I can definitely relate to kind of what you're sharing.
Yeah, exactly. It just helps to have someone like that in that professional capacity, someone that actually wants to help you. Whereas, and I'm sure everyone here, and you've definitely had this experience where you try to talk to someone that's like, hey, I need help, or I want to know more about to apply to college, and they just send you a link. And at that point, it's kind of like, well, obviously I knew you have a website, but I need more help. But having that person that will follow up and be like, yes, let me give you information, my contact, blah, 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 that makes all the difference in the future for those students.
Right, definitely. And how would you describe working in higher ed as a Latino, and kind of how has that been for you?
Sure. So, I mean, I think it's definitely, again, I have that secret ninja skill where they don't really see me as Latino until I start speaking in Spanish. So it's kind of been a little bit different than I think what other people's experience usually is. But in terms of maybe getting some of those Latinx experience and events out there, it's definitely been tough. I mean, you know, you always try to reach out to a department or to office and, you know, try to start some sort of project to help the Latinx student population. And there always seems to be some sort of pushback, right? As in, like, we don't have time, or, you know, what if this opens a floodgate and other people start asking for other language sessions? And it's like, you know, I understand those concerns. You know, maybe we don't have the capacity or the staff to do it, but we should make that effort, right? I know that one time I talked to a department and they were saying like, oh, we don't want to do this session because then people are going to start asking for it in different languages. And I'm like, what's wrong with that? Right? Like, so they start asking it for it in different languages. What about we reach out to our linguistics department and see if any of those students want a professional experience opportunity, right? Or if we, you know, check our staff and our faculty here and see if maybe one of them is willing to jump on board to spread the knowledge and spread the word about Georgia State to our different communities here in Atlanta, right? So it's hard, but I've always resolved myself to be that, you know, kind of that bitchy person at Georgia State, and I know this 100%. I will make my emotions clear. I will make my intents clear and be like, oh, you don't want to do that? Well, that sounds problematic to me, and you're going to know from it. You're going to know about it from me too. Yeah. Right? I mean, how many times have we taken students to that, you know, that department? I will not say their name. We will not name them. They shall remain unnamed. But we would take them to that department, and they would just honestly treat our students like garbage. Yeah. And it was terrible to sort of stand there and be like, I'm so sorry that you have to deal with this. You should expect better, especially when that's their specialty, right? But you'll be happy to know that the one that we talked about, she will not be named, is no longer as the director. She's somewhere else. So.
Yeah, the struggles, right? The struggles of having to juggle with getting people on board and realizing the importance of why it's important to open up these programs and these sessions for like the Spanish-speaking population that are applying, and prospective families and students, right? Like, why wouldn't that benefit the institution as a whole? Like, you're getting more in the door, you know, you're servicing their needs. So like, why wouldn't you want to go for that? But you definitely do. I also have definitely encountered those struggles as well in other institutions. I'm not at Georgia State now, but I can definitely say that that definitely is a pressing issue still for other institutions as well. So I definitely know it's a constant issue. So hopefully there's more people like us that are pushing that agenda and really making those changes, right, for the better of everyone, to make it more inclusive. Because how can you say you're a diverse institution, but you're not creating these types of programs and servicing the population how they should, right?
Exactly. And that's something that we always bring up is like, you know, the need and demand for these kinds of sessions is always there. It's just a willingness to make accommodations for that. So like, I mean, you know, Georgia, we're kind of like the liberal state of the South now, because we won the last election, which I'm very happy about. But
Georgia.
Yeah, literally saved the Congress. But you know, it's funny because, you know, we're always like, oh, like Atlanta's this diversity metropolitan area, but then there's always a pushback for these kind of events, and it's like, you know, you can't play both sides of the field here. You either are that multinational, multicultural institution and you divert or promote that diversity, or you don't. You take that
Right.
step back and you say, we're not even going to approach the subject. But, the good part is we're seeing a larger interest in our staff and faculty to make these kind of events happen. Even we had, and this is a shameless pitch, I'm so sorry, a shameless plug, but we're actually doing a Camino Estate, like the Path to College events for Hispanic and Latinx student populations, where we provide admission sessions, financial aid session, and student success sessions in both English and Spanish for all of our students.
Wow.
So that way, parents can get that financial aid information directly in Spanish, know what it means to do FAFSA verification, what a tax IRS transcript means, all that stuff, where, if they went to the English session, the kid has to try to understand that. And of course, the kids are like, ooh, what's the W-2, right? So we're slowly getting there, but, hopefully I'm hoping one day will just be a standard thing where you'll see a Spanish and English session side by side, especially with Spanish and English becoming our official language for the United States of America at this point.
Yeah, and I will definitely say that there are a lot of institutions that are on board with all this. So props to you all that have already implemented this, because I feel like it's so definite. It's crucial, right? It's crucial to in so many levels. So I definitely want to applaud those that have definitely taken that road and offer that, because you're taking our students.
Yes.
But really, I mean, I just feel like it really is a good avenue to have and to provide for that given population, for sure.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So, okay. So in these interviews, I would definitely love to implement something fun and cool. So I like to add like a little game here and there. So,
all right.
So we're going to play this or that. Okay. Do you prefer English or Spanish?
Let's do Spanish.
Okay.
I want to show off a little bit and prove to these people I do actually speak Spanish.
Súper. Ok. Entonces te voy a dar opciones y tú escoge una o la otra. Ok.
Suena bien.
Ok. Entonces, ¿qué prefieres? ¿Prefieres ser invisible o leer la mente de la gente?
Leer la mente de la gente, porque quiero saber de todo el chismo y la chisma que está pasando. Lo de fulano de tal, si metió con quién, no, pues no, imagínate. No, me encantaría leer la mente, digo.
Ok, sí, creo que yo igual.
¿Sí, verdad?
Sí. A ver, ¿qué prefieres? ¿No tener internet o no tener teléfono?
No, prefiero no tener teléfono, porque digo, no puedo vivir sin internet. Simplemente necesito el Facebook, Instagram, todo el YouTube, ahora Disney Plus y esas cosas. Pero estoy harto del teléfono porque todos me están llamando, preguntándome, did you know your car warranty is about to expire? Y ya no tengo carro a este punto, ¿por qué me están llamando? No tener teléfono a este punto sería mucho mejor.
Sí, ya, ok. ¿Prefieres tacos o prefieres tamales?
Ay, pues tacos 100%. Digo, me encantan los señores y señoras que están ahí en la calle, los tamales y gritando, me encanta. Pero, ay, los tacos del sur de la Ciudad de México.
Son una delicia, ¿no?
Una delicia. Los abanicos, todo eso de carnitas, ay, se me está olvidando, ¿cómo se llama? ¿Cuál?
¿Adobada o al pastor?
Al pastor ese. Ay, no, pues no tienen madre, es súper rico y siempre mis amigos me preguntan, oye, voy a hacer tacos de ground beef y los veo como, ¿qué pinches tacos? ¿Por qué no te vayas a taco entonces? Pero
sí,
digo,
eso no son tacos.
No son tacos, I shouldn't gatekeep, pero tacos de verdad, si lo sabes, son súper ricos.
Súper bien. A ver, con la salsa, ¿prefieres salsa Valentina o salsa tapatío?
Ay, Valentina, no, pues la Valentina es la mejor salsa en todo el mundo. Yo sé que no es cierto, pero para mí es 100% cierto. También porque como soy japonés y me gusta mi ramen, lo hago al estilo chilango, cuando le pongo mi ramen, un poquito de limón y Valentina y lo mezclo todo junto y una deliqueza. Me encanta.
Súper. A ver, ¿qué prefieres? ¿Poder volar o poder respirar bajo el agua?
Poder volar, porque ya no tengo que pagar para el boleto de avión para irme a México o a Japón o lo que sea, o para viajar al menos, pero no, poder volar, nada más para evitar también todas las cuotas, visas, todo eso.
Sí, sí, va súper bien. A ver, ¿qué prefieres? ¿Pausar el tiempo o retroceder el tiempo?
pausar el tiempo.
Okay.
Porque de esta manera por fin voy a hacer mis tareas antes de la fecha del límite, antes de la fecha que tengo que entregar. Y también para robar los bancos, digo, pausas el tiempo y nada más te empiezas ahí a agarrar el dinero. Like, ok, bye. Y después resumes el tiempo.
Sí.
Y no van a saber.
Ah, ya. Qué chistoso, sí. A ver, ¿qué prefieres? ¿Amor ilimitado o dinero ilimitado? Está difícil.
Pues dinero, porque ¿cómo voy a pagar para esta renta y los préstamos y todo eso, verdad? En este mundo que vivimos, el dinero, pues con el dinero me puedo comprar amor, está bien. Y eso se llaman perros, me encantan. Por de cualquier hombre que vas a encontrar.
Sí, no, tienes razón. Los perros
Perdón,
siempre tienen amor incondicional.
exacto.
Ajá.
Y con los perros, gatitos, lo que sea, siempre te van a amar porque estás ahí, les estás dando de comer, pero el hombre, pues quién sabe, le das comida algo malo, lo sacas a un date y sale mal y se sale de ahí, ¿verdad? Al menos si le pongo un collar a mi perro, no se va a ir corriendo.
Bueno, sí, de hecho sí. Siempre son fieles, ¿no?
Sí, exacto.
Pues no tienen de otra. No te pueden hablar.
Exacto, digo, le puedo decir, oye, hasta le digo a mi perrita a Kitty, a veces lo llego aquí en la casa y es like, hola perrita bonita, y me ve como, ay, qué padre, y a veces nada más entro y es like, ¿qué quieres tu pedra, hija de la chingada? Y todavía me sigue viendo como like, ya llegaste.
Ni saben, ¿no?
Ni saben.
Súper bien. A ver, y por último, ¿qué prefieres, ser vampiro o ser un mago?
Ser un mago, necesito el sol, ya sabes, nosotros latinos nos tenemos que ir a la playa, ponernos un poquito más cafés,
Ajá.
y al menos si soy un mago con dinero ilimitado, pues imagínate, voy a ser el próximo Elon Musk o lo quien sea, voy a construir un carro o un avión eléctrico y voy a decir, mira, es mi carro eléctrico o mi avión eléctrico y lo hice totalmente solo y va a resultar de magia. No, pues todo el dinero que voy a ganar y la reputación, no, 100% es magia.
Sí, de hecho, hace rato pusieron en el comentario que si eras Elon Musk.
Sí, lo vi también. It's like, is that Elon Musk? I'm like, I wish I was.
Yeah, a lot of people probably wish that too.
Shoot, be the richest man in the world, 100%, and then donate everything to the charities and keep like a measly 100 mil.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. Great. So, Kenzo, thank you so much. Gracias por tu tiempo. Ya casi estamos al último del segmento de la entrevista. Y por lo último, me gusta preguntar, ¿qué consejo le darías a la comunidad? Lo puedes decir en español, en inglés, como quieras.
Spanglish. No, I'm kidding.
Ajá.
Pues, I'll do it in English, but my biggest advice is loving yourself is a journey, right? I don't think you cannot just wake up one day and love your identity, love your culture, love your background, and love everything that's happened to you. Mm-hmm. It definitely is something where you need to start every day little by little and realize, when I was little and saying like, oh, I don't want to be Mexican because they're XYZ stereotypes, which were not true. It's, involving yourself and looking at that heritage and that culture and saying, I'm Mexican. What does that mean? Pues Dia de los Muertos, right? That is a beautiful holiday. Mm-hmm. Or Dia de los Niños, when my dad would get me a gift and I had no idea why. And I'm like, oh my God, yay, kids. Or, like slowly finding out when I would see my cousins and my grandparents and the amount of love that they would share for us and community and everything, it shows you how to slowly start to love that part of yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you start loving that part of yourself, when you come to realize that, by loving each individual part, you start to love yourself as a whole, it's really the best way to be successful, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Just because, if you have those self-doubts, if you have those worries, then you may not throw yourself 100% into your goal or into your path. Right? I mean, look at mechanical engineering. I did 2 years there thinking I'm going to be super great. And then I'm like, I'm so dumb. And I thought that for 2 years, my grades dropped and my mental health dropped. And when I switched majors and really started to embrace, like, I'm not dumb. It just, wasn't the right field for me. I'm really smart in these areas. And having that Hispanic and Asian background really helped in this area. When I tell you my GPA literally jumped from, what was it, a 1.6 to a 3.8 from one semester to the other. It just shows you how important it is to choose the right thing for you and to love yourself for choosing the right things. Even if, mom and dad say oh, that's not for you. Well, they're not you, are they? How are they going to know? So
Right.
make sure that you love yourself for what you love, and for what you like to do. And if you follow that, then I guarantee you'll find happiness in life.
Yes. Dang. Yes. I love that. Yes,
Yummy.
yes, yes, yes. Ay, Kenzo, gracias.
And then
Gracias,
one last thing,
amigo,
I have.
colega. Thank you
Oh,
so much for your time, for sharing your story, for just opening up and really being you. This really is him, guys. He is like this 24/7.
well, you know me, Jenny. I just love to talk about myself because I'm everything. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, and I really do hope that your story inspires others, whether it's pursuing a degree in the sciences, if it's moving away for college, or if it's being a higher ed professional. I mean, really anything. I hope that people are inspired and really know that it is possible to pursue whatever it is that you put in your mind to do. And if people were to want to reach out to you for any kind of guidance, advice, anything, like how would they be able to do that?
Yes, find me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is going to be the best place to reach out to me.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember my LinkedIn handle straight off the top of my head, but I guarantee you, if you type in Kenzo Tsuru, I'm going to be the only one in this entire country of the United States of America that has that name. I've checked Google, I've checked databases, I'm the only one. So definitely feel free to reach out to me
Look
on
at
LinkedIn. I'm unique. But feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And then, of course, I think at this point, you see my Instagram handle. You can try to shoot me a DM there, and I'll be more than happy to connect with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always happy to reach out and help anyone that has any questions about, especially applying to college or moving away from home. Like, I get it. I went from Georgia to New York. That was a huge cultural shift, but I would highly recommend it for everyone and anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, if you want to get more pictures of my dog here, I'll be more than happy to send those to you too.
You're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did. And this is just a reminder again to really be proud of our culture, our Latinx culture, what we're made out of, and really showcase that to the world, and don't be shy to really show all those identities, right? So thank you again, Kenzo. Thank you so much. Gracias por tu tiempo. Gracias y hasta la próxima.
Hasta la próxima y fue un placer. Ya sabes que siempre que quieres que venga para acá o que esté para una de estas sesiones, voy a estar aquí.
Sí.
Cuando les digo bye, Kitty.
Ay, qué linda.
Bye,
Bye a todos. Gracias. Thank
Bye,
you
muchas
everyone for
gracias.
joining. Bye.